Hello there. Um, Ruben here with Cooking in Kitchens. And I'm not cooking anything today on this one, but this is a talk discussion about food. Came across this article here that I found to be a very, very good article that talks about pasteurization and ultra pasteurization. Um, uh, I'm not going to dig into the actual like origins of pasteurization, but there's plenty of articles on that on the history and how it to uh, came to become like a public requirement, as it would be. And but as I like to say, just because we can doesn't mean that we should. Uh, Type of thing. And so this article here, written by Sally Fallon Morell, talks about how basically in our efforts to protect, in the efforts of our um, government bodies to protect the public, the efforts have in the long term been creating disastrous health effects. But let's go ahead and take a look at this. Uh, we start here with a little bit of history here. In the summer of 1983, an outbreak of listeriosis occurred in Massachusetts. 49 people became sick, and 14 of those 29, which is 29%, died. Listeria is the bad actor among the pathogens. Most pathogens make people sick but don't kill them. Listeria, on the other hand, often kills, especially the very young, the elderly, and the immunocompromised. Listeria is among the Listeria most commonly occurs in deli meats, seafood, raw vegetables, soft cheeses, and poultry. But the 1983 outbreak was different. It came from pasteurized milk. Uh, Health officials isolated listeria from the raw milk that came into the pasteurized plant. Uh, at the plant where the milk was processed, inspection revealed no evidence of improper pasteurization. The officials were perplexed, but noted that L. monocytogenes is quite resistant to heat. The ability of L. monocytogenes to exist as an intracellular parasite may have increased the likelihood that some of the organisms survive pasteurization. Um, so, as we've been hearing, probably many of you have been hearing about the supposed superbugs that, because of the overuse of antibiotics, um, strains of bacteria will adapt, as it would be, um, if need be, if it find if it comes to realizing that something is killing them. Species want to survive, and that includes bacteria. Um, they came to an interesting conclusion that these results arise questions about the ability of pasteurization to eradicate a large inoculum of L. monocytogenes from contaminated milk. Uh, a year later, a huge outbreak of Salmonella typhimurium occurred in Illinois, with a second wave in 1985. So that's just a couple years after 1983 and 1985. The pathogen was found resistant to most common forms of antibiotics. Uh, Two surveys to determine the number of persons who were actually affected yielded estimates of 168,791 and 197,581 persons, making this the largest outbreak of salmonellosis ever identified in the United States. 5 people died. At least 5 people died. So a lot of people got sick, uh, but not nearly as lethal as the listeria that we had up here. Um, the outbreak affected people in 6 states: Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, Iowa, and Indiana. Uh, Health officials concluded that the milk was contaminated after pasteurization by salmonella, which persisted in the plant despite efforts to eradicate it. So, according to this, that it didn't come in contaminated, it was contaminated after the pasteurization. So, it was, as they were saying, persisted in the plant despite efforts to eradicate it. So, if said milk had just gone out raw, it would not have, nobody would have gotten sick. Um, uh, the arrival of factory farming. Something else was going on during those years. Dairy farms were getting bigger. Consolidation began in the 1930s with pigs, and in the 1950s with chickens. In the 1970s, Agricultural Secretary Earl Butz Earl Butz uh, told farmers to get big or get out. Uh, Here we are, basically, destroying the family farms. And by the mid 1980s, this trend was in full force. Get bigger, get out also meant get inside. The U.S. Department of Agriculture was advising dairy farmers to become more efficient by keeping their cows in barns and feeding them grain. As we have now, it goes on to explain that how grain is not natural for cows to eat. Large amounts of grain are not natural diet for cows, nor is it natural for cows to live in close quarters with no way of distancing themselves from their fresh manure. To keep the cows alive in such conditions of filth, antibiotics became necessary. It was a recipe for antibiotic resistance and stronger mutant pathogens. As I was saying, bacteria like to keep living. They like to continue on with their species, and if they have to adapt to a harsher environment, they are most certainly capable of doing it. And here we have a situation of government, or in this case specifically, Ag Secretary Earl Butz, um, making things worse for us uh, in an attempt to supposedly protect us. When realistically, I think the more proper solution would be to improve uh, testing, but improve testing measures for the food before it goes out, uh, as opposed to just running it through a pasteurization process, or implementing all of these rather dubious methods that are just making the problems worse. Um, as I like to say, that the agency exists to solve the problems created by its existence. Um, Anyways, moving on. With the outbreaks of the mid 1980s, the dairy industry realized that under these new conditions, pasteurization was not working. Unfortunately, their solution to the problem was not to go cleaner, but to go hotter. Enter UHT, ultra high temperature processing. Old fashioned low temperature pasteurization takes milks to 150 degrees, not hot enough to destroy most enzymes in milk, or which is hot enough to destroy most enzymes in milk, many of which protect against pathogens, while others attach to vitamins and minerals in order to make them easy to absorb. High temperature pasteurization, also known as flash pasteurization, and you'll also see these in not just milks, but many drinks that you will find on the shelves. Particularly like orange juice too. That and any other fruit and vegetable juices, they'll go through a pasteurization process. Um, and Years ago, I read an article about the pasteurization of orange juice. That vitamin C is very, very fragile, or sensitive to temperatures. So when it goes through the when they go through and they boil it, basically, and they cook it, it breaks down the vitamin C. So you're not even getting the vitamin C that it claims that you are getting, um, because it's dead. It's broken down. The vitamin is no longer um, effective anymore, and so you're basically just drinking orange flavored soft drink, orange flavored sugar water, because the sugar is still there. It's still going to affect your blood sugar, but you're missing out on the vitamins and the beneficial uh, properties. So moving on, ultra pasteurization takes milk to 284 degrees Fahrenheit, hotter, much hotter than the boiling point, by rushing this most fragile, delicate food past superheated stainless steel plates. The process kills bacteria, endospores, tough dormant structures produced by many pathogens, which allows them to hibernate and come back when life conditions are sufficiently favorable, such as the small intestine. The process also kills everything else, including nutrients, enzymes, and proteins. UHT milk comes packaged in aseptic, sterile containers. It needs no refrigeration and it has a shelf life of 6 to 9 months. A boon to retailers, this process was developed in Europe. I remember seeing stacks of these aseptic containers in supermarkets in France when I lived there during the early 1800s, and wondered why anyone would buy that milk that didn't spoil. Um, in the early 1990s, the Italian company Parmalat introduced its UHT milk to the United States. American consumers resisted purchasing unrefrigerated milk, understandably so. So the industry packaged it in traditional containers and sold it from the refrigerator aisle. Uh, According to Parmalat's website, UHT milk is the same as fresh milk, but simply uses different pasteurization process. It contains a lot of nutrients that are good for your body, just like fresh milk, it adds. With our special pasteurization process, our milk doesn't need to be stored in the fridge until open. This means that you can store as many bottles as you want and never run out of milk. Yeah, who's buying that line? Apparently, at the time, the American consumers weren't. But we can't get easily. I suppose it depends on the state, but getting raw milk or unpasteurized products at all can be rather difficult depending upon the state that you live in. A 2019 study from China titled "Processing Milk Causes the Formation of Protein Antioxidation." Sorry, processing milk causes the formation of protein oxidation products which impair spatial learning and memory in rats. Indicates that UHT milk is not like fresh milk at all. Yeah, from China, no less. The researchers subjected milk to 4 processing techniques: boiling, microwave heating, spray drying, and freeze drying. Spray drying. That's interesting. Boiling takes the milk to 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Ultra pasteurization is much harder. Yeah, as we saw earlier, like 285, 284. All 4 techniques, even freeze drying, caused various degrees of redox state imbalance and oxidative damage in plasma, liver, and brain tissue. Feeding damaged milk proteins to rats resulted in learning and memory impairment. Why would any parent want to give UHT milk to their kids? Yep. Is anybody wondering why we're starting to see why we're having these learning disabilities, and as the generations go by, um, you can see uh, um, you'll find a number of teachers that are now posting up on their TikToks how they're noticing um, children having more and more learning disabilities, and food is very important in that. Uh, but anyway, moving on. Uh, Other researchers have noted that the major protein modifications that occur during the UHT treatment are denaturation and aggregation of the protein, the chemical modifications of its amino acids. Damaged milk proteins are likely to cause allergies. Today, milk allergy is the number one allergy according to the statistics provided by the Asthma and Allergy Network. We can estimate that modern milk causes approximately 20 deaths from anaphylactic shock per year. Well, I mean, milk shouldn't be causing any deaths, but like 20 is not really huge. When you take into account that everything else that's killing us, but it's still, interesting to note. Most milk sold today in supermarkets is UHT milk. Even organic milk is UHT, but it is not used in fermented products. Check the labels for sour cream or cheese. These products are made from pasteurized non-UHT milk, most likely because UHT milk is so dead that it will not ferment. That's the other way of saying that UHT milk is indigestible, as fermentation is a form of digestion. A recent listeria outbreak causing 2 deaths, oh dear, 2 whole deaths, and more than 20 hospitalization initialized a February 5 recall of pasteurized yogurt, cheese, and sour cream, an indication that pasteurization doesn't ensure safety in fermented dairy foods. Which is what I'm saying. Just have the batches tested prior to distribution instead of running it through, spending all this time, energy, and effort to run it through this processing. UHT milk has served as a temporary fix for the dairy industry, but it will ultimately be its undoing. Milk consumption in the United States has declined by half since 1970, and the dairy industry has been unable to reverse the trend. It blames competition from sodas, plant-based milk, but won't admit that UHT processing makes milk unpalatable, allergenic, and indigestible. So, here's our local remedy. How to find good old fashioned unprocessed milk. Usually, you can just look it up. You can just throw it into the search bar and find it wherever you live. The public is wising up to the problems of consuming ultra pasteurized or ultra processed food, and UHT milk is by definition an ultra processed food. This may be why sales of raw milk are booming. The website realmilk.com receives more than 320,000 visits per month, mostly to the raw milk finder page. The site lists 3,000 sources of raw milk in the United States. There are many more dairies that choose not to be listed, yet raw milk farmers are reporting that they can't produce enough to meet the demand. Which I was taking a look here. Kitsap Fresh. We go at getrawmilk.com. I was taking a look here. Kitsapfresh.org. And this for those that live in Kitsap. This is a pretty great spot to find like immediately local producers. I did try to find their raw milk. There's only one creamery here in Kitsap. There's only one place that actually produces raw milk. Let me buy food, and they were out. It doesn't surprise me that their one farm wouldn't be able to supply the demand of the local peninsula. Um, producers, producers category. It's under dairy, all dairy. So bringing up dairy, you only get cheese. So I suspect the one farm is out. It was a creamery. They got quite a bit up here, I have to say. But I've been thinking about starting to use them, uh, uh, use these folks for collecting, getting more. Oh, here it is, the Willowbridge Creamer. I believe this is it. Uh, but yeah, yeah. So this is it. I tried seeing that they're all out. Um, anyhow, not surprising. It's becoming more and more popular here, and they're the only ones here on the peninsula. Um, the site lists 3,000 sources of raw milk. Yeah, we were there. Yet raw milk farmers are reporting that they can't produce enough to meet the demand. Raw Farm in California provides raw milk, produces a herd of 1,200 cows, and they sell it all. So she goes on. Her particularly 20 years, UHT milk will be a thing of the past. Well, we actually needed to be a thing of the past like 20 years ago. Um, let's see here. Recognized as a misuse of technology, a Rust Belt solution that ruins the goodness of nature's perfect food. We have many elegant technologies today. Stainless steel, on-site testing, which is I think is what really needs to happen. More on-site testing. National cold chain and movable electric fences that make grazing feasible, which will allow us to get clean raw milk safely to every person in America. Get bigger, go hotter is not the future. The future is small, medium, grass-based farms selling raw milk directly to grateful consumers. Agreed. Agreed. And we need to most certainly support local farmers and stuff like that that are um, that are producing our food. Um, so that is what I got for now. Uh, next next episode, I'm actually going to be doing a knife sharpening episode. I just uh, ordered a knife sharpening kit. Pretty fancy. So that's going to be the next one. So I will see you on that, and thank you for watching. Later.